Hi there, welcome to the Patreon review request for the supporters through the month of June. Some quick bookkeeping stuff before we begin. From last month's recommendations, a few things that I picked up. Jarmo P suggested this book right here. Get the glare off of it. There you go. Here's the name of it. Here's the author. He's pretty full of himself. This is a science fiction, military action kind of thing. And I'm not sure it's working for me. I've just read the first, act, whatever, chapter. And it opens with a bunch of action stuff. And my feeling is that's not a great way to open a book. A movie, yeah. I'll stick with it, Jarmo, but it's so far just a bunch of characters shooting guns and yelling while aliens shoot at them. I do like some of the military hardware stuff that they reference in this. So, at any rate, Jarmo, this is something that I read from your recommendation last month. This, however, I want to talk about. Scott D recommended this, and he didn't say much about it. He just mentioned that he really liked the writing. This is fantastic. And whatever I counter-recommended last month, Scott D, I want to change that. And I'll explain why in a minute. One of the reasons this is fantastic is the writing, as you mentioned, Scott. This guy is a really good writer. I don't know, well, there's plenty of good writers I don't know, but Adam Johnson is a name worth paying attention to. But more importantly, or just as important, what this book is about is really engaging. So, North Korea right now is in the news a lot. Because of the state that Otto Warmbier was returned to the U.S. in. He was comatose. We don't know what happened to him over there. And our imaginations work overtime. What the hell is going on in North Korea? And that is a fundamental fact of North Korea, is that it's closed off. It's a walled kingdom run by a crazy dynasty. There's a book called World War Z by Max Brooks, which I don't care for, but it examines a zombie apocalypse around the globe and how it takes place in different parts of the world. And the zombie apocalypse in North Korea is characterized by the fact that we don't know what happened over there. It's crazy. So North Korea is a huge cipher for a lot of us, and every now and then we hear about them lobbing a missile at Japan. Orphan Master's Son is an amazingly humanistic insight into, it's not an apology for North Korea, but into what it must be like living over there, just for the average person. And it's beautifully written. So my counter recommendation, I forgot what I mentioned last month, I want to change that to a book called The Sorrows of War by Bao Ninh, N-I-N-H. It's about a North Vietnamese soldier in Vietnam. It's kind of All Quiet on the Western Front, except instead of being about the Germans in World War I, it's about the North Vietnamese in the Vietnam War. Also beautifully written, very lyrical. So that's my counter recommendation there. All right, on to this month. Normally I'd pour a beer here, but it's a little too early in the day for me to drink a beer. But I do want to point out, this was sent to me by Alex C. Can you see the branding there? So normally I'd be pouring a Milk Stout Nitro into this cup, which seems a little small. It's got to be a pint glass, right? And I would be drinking it during this video. It's a little early in the day, so instead, I have an espresso. And we're recording earlier for the light, I guess, because it's brighter, so you guys don't have to watch me in murky light. Who cares, right? But if you do care, hopefully you can see me a little better. You can see things like this book cover a little better during daylight. Let's see. So I do guarantee, Alex C., I will be doing a movie podcast later tonight, and this will, for the first time, because I was saving it for this video, this will be full of Milk Stout Nitro later tonight for a podcast. All right, let's get on to the submissions this month. As you know, this is my supporters for $10 or more on Patreon. Once a month, I ask them, hey, tell me something to review. Give me a recommendation. Troll me with something. There's a little bit of that. And I will pick one from a hat. And by hat, I mean randomresult.com on this iPad. And then I will also counter-recommend something in this video. So everyone get comfortable, because we're going to be here for a little while. We are going to start with David D. recommends, or suggests, or would like me to write about Mahjong. Wow. I can't imagine I would like Mahjong, but I know very little about it. and David D. has basically explained, hey, where I live, Mahjong, Go, I think he mentioned chess, those are the games that people play. I would like to know what you think of Mahjong. So that's his pick, and he describes what he writes about it, and this actually makes me curious about it. He says, quote, the thrill of manipulating those sexy tiles, end quote. He says that's something I might appreciate about Mahjong. And I'm definitely down with that. Hold on real quick. Let me go to randomresult.com for later. All right, we're all set there. When I hear someone talk about Mahjong and use the words sexy, and here's my counter recommendation, David D. I am reminded of an Ang Lee movie called Lust, Caution. And I don't know if you could tell from my voice, but that is Lust, comma, Caution. If I just say Lust, Caution, that would be a different movie. Lust, Caution is the Ang Lee movie. It is a Mata Hari kind of spy scenario while the Japanese are occupying China. And it is very sexy. And amongst the scenes that Ang Lee, of course, he can be very American. He can do goofy stuff like the Hulk. But he's also, of course, being from Hong Kong, he's rooted in things uniquely Chinese. And this comes through in some of his movies. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, of course. I can't imagine that directed by a Western director. One of the things you see in Lust, Caution is a Mahjong game played amongst women. The spy and various wives as she's trying to insinuate herself with the Chinese occupiers. They play Mahjong, and obviously Ang Lee knows something that's going on that I don't appreciate because I just, there's something with what tiles they play. It's like in a movie where characters are playing poker with each other. If you know the rules of poker, you can maybe appreciate the scene differently than if you just see dudes sort of glancing at each other and bluffing and throwing cards down. So if you understand Mahjong, you might appreciate more than I did the scene in Lust, Caution, which is definitely a sexy movie. That's number one. Number two, Sam S., and I think I've seen this. I need a pencil, hold on. Sam S. suggests Burnt by the Sun, a Russian movie directed by, let me attempt this, Nikita Mikhalkov. Did I get that right? And I've actually seen this. I looked it up on IMDb and recognized the description. I think I've seen this when I was a kid. But it's an older Russian movie. Beyond that, I don't know much. So Sam S., my counter recommendation, speaking of things older and Russian, there's a Chekhov play called Uncle Vanya. And David Mamet wrote an adaptation, a translation of Uncle Vanya called Uncle Vanya. Louise Malle, a French director, filmed a movie about people putting on a production of David Mamet's translation of Chekhov's Uncle Vanya. And it was one of my early exposures to Chekhov. I don't know Chekhov from Tolstoy. It's not true. I would know them from one. At any rate, I didn't know any Chekhov, and I saw this movie, Uncle Vanya on 42nd Street, which is the Louise Malle movie. Louis Malle, whatever. And I love some of the actors in it. It's Louis Malle did with Andre Gregory, a movie called My Dinner with Andre, which that's way too highfalutin. No one needs to see that. But Wally Shawn is in Uncle Vanya on 42nd Street. Julianne Moore, an actress I feel who's very underrated, who unfortunately people just know as the put the lotion in the basket chick. An actress named Brooke Smith is in it, and she's fantastic. So there's my counter recommendation for old Russian things. Uncle Vanya on 42nd Street, by way of David Mamet, by way of Louis Malle. Number three, Joseph M., who got me to read my first Ian Banks book, recommended, okay, now wait, we're not clear. Okay, so he said he was going to recommend a book called Annihilation, which is science fiction by Jeff Vandermeer. You might not know of Annihilation right now, but you will in, I think within the next year, because Alex Garland is making an adaptation of the first book in the trilogy called Annihilation. The movie will be called Annihilation as well. I would describe Annihilation as Lovecraft meets modern science. It's about scientists who go into another dimension, kind of. I don't know what Alex Garland is going to do with it. Reading the book, it seems like it would be very challenging. So Joseph M. was going to vote for Annihilation, but he says because of the upcoming movie, that doesn't need any additional exposure. So instead, he is recommending that I go to my second Ian Banks book, which he suggests should be Consider Phlebas. and because I enjoyed Player of Games so much, I just went ahead and ordered this. So Joseph M. Now wait, I'm not clear. The actual vote, right, so Consider Phlebas is the actual vote. He explained it is instead of Annihilation, which he was going to vote for, and I have read Annihilation. I haven't read the other two in the trilogy. I'm looking forward to seeing what Alex Garland does with the movie. So because Joseph M. You opened with Annihilation, my counter recommendation is going to relate to Annihilation instead of Consider Phlebas. Don't know anything about Consider Phlebas, and I'm happy to go in blind. So my counter recommendation for Annihilation, if you think of that as Lovecraft in the context of modern scientific inquiry, you know, what if people did a field test in a Lovecraftian alternate dimension? There is a Charles Stross short story, I think it's technically a novella, called A Colder War. And if you just Google that, A Colder War, maybe put Stoss's name in there. Stoss or Stross? I actually wrote this down because I don't know who Charles Stross is. Charles Stross, right. S-T-R-O-S-S. Just Google that because you can read the story online, and it is another story about Lovecraft in the context of modern day, because of course Howard Phillips Lovecraft was writing much earlier in the 20th century. What is it like when you've got things like jets and nuclear weapons and cell phones and stuff? So A Colder War is what if Cthulhu, basically the Elder Gods, became a player in the Cold War. It's very intriguing writing. It's more in the concept than the writing, but it's a thrilling concept. Number 4, Bruce G. recommends Messiah of Stockholm. He doesn't say anything about it. It was written by Cynthia Ozick. Looking up online what exactly it is. It's something about a Swedish intellectual, and I think there's Nazis in it, and they're chasing a manuscript or something. Wasn't quite sure. And coming from Bruce G., I'm also not sure if it is a troll vote, but Messiah of Stockholm, Cynthia Ozick. That's number 4. My counter recommendation, when I think of Sweden, I think of Hey Sweden. It's delivered by Kurt Russell in the movie The Thing. John Carpenter's The Thing. There's my counter recommendation. Number 5, ARMS with the motion controller. It's a fighting game on the Nintendo Switch. That is Greg R's recommendation. I've actually seen this. It looks cute, I guess. I don't have a Switch. Happy to get one. I intend to before Xenoblade Chronicles 2 comes out. My counter recommendation, Greg R., as far as co-op fun fighting games, here's an obscure thing. On Steam, you can find a game called, I'm vaguely uneasy with this title, Slice, Dice, and Rice. It's actually a fairly cool fighting game with kind of black and white stylish graphics, a little Darkest Dungeon vibe, kind of. But it's a one-hit, one-kill fighting game where it's over very quickly. You're not worrying about hit point bars. There was what was that? There was a like Shogun Warrior, or at any rate from way back in maybe the PlayStation 2 days, there was Samurai Shoot. At any rate, there was a fighting game we really liked because once you hit someone, it was over and you moved on to the next match. And it was a great way to play a fighting game passing the controller around in the living room. Slice, Dice, and Rice is that. And I recommend it. It's a $10 couch game on Steam, and especially if you have Steam Big Picture and you can pipe your Steam games into the living room, Slice, Dice, and Rice I recommend it as a couch multiplayer game. All right, number 6. Jeff S. describing it as the best movie he's ever seen. I don't know that I could do that. If someone was to ask you, what's the best movie you've ever seen? Could you answer that? I don't think I can. Jeff picks Werner Herzog's Stroszek. And I'm going to have to look up how to spell that when I write this on the screen. Believe me, I looked that up. All right, Jeff, best movie I've ever seen. Well, all I can go on there, because I have movies that I love, that I resonate with in different ways, that I like for different reasons. I couldn't apply that kind of superlative to any one movie. So rather than approach you on that angle, let's go with Werner Herzog. Werner Herzog, fascinating filmmaker, but an equally fascinating actor. And I'm sure we all know he was the villain in Jack Reacher. There was not quite enough Werner Herzog in that to balance the Tom Cruise, if you're into that. So that's not what I'm recommending. Also, I recently watched, there's a really a movie called Shimmer Lake on Netflix that I recommend. It was written and directed by someone named Oren Uziel, and one of his previous movies was Freaks of Nature, and it is terrible. Freaks of Nature is about a town in which human beings and zombies and vampires all learn to get along. They're living together. And some of them in high school, there's an alien invasion, and a human and a zombie and a vampire get together and fend off this alien invasion. And it is as silly as it sounds. Oren Uziel wrote the script. I forgot who directed it. It's a big mess, but at the end, and boy did they think this was funny, the alien overlord who comes to Earth and ends up just talking to him and saying, hey, we don't mean to freak you out. We're just here to pick something up. Is a big animated E.T. glowing looking alien voiced by Werner Herzog. And they really thought that was hilarious. It kind of was, especially considering what you had to sit through to get to that. But here is the Werner Herzog I'm recommending. There is a documentary called Incident at Loch Ness that is about Werner Herzog making a documentary about the Loch Ness Monster. I will say no more except that if you're fascinated, if your favorite movie is a Werner Herzog movie and you haven't seen Incident at Loch Ness, you owe it to yourself to do that. Number 7, Andrew S., we've got a couple of these. Andrew S. recommends The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor Laval. It looks French. So I saw this and I assumed it was some older 19th century, maybe French thing. It's not. It's modern. It's apparently contemporary horror. I'm down with that. So Ballad of Black Tom made me think of... So a friend of mine came to me once and he said, hey, I'm starting to read Lovecraft. Recommend for me some stories. What should I read? So I recommended for him Rats in the Walls. And I said, there's a really cool character in there. Just suffice to say, it's a little animal. I love the way, I love this animal, the way it's described. I love the name that they give it. It's really cool. Read that, you'll know what I'm talking about. And of course, I was talking about Brown Jenkin, which is a familiar. He's like a little demon, and he's a rat with a human being's face. And I just remember that making quite the mental impression on me, because Brown Jenkin appears in the story, and he's really freaky. Imagine that. Imagine a rat with the face of a human being. And so that's what I was describing for my friend when I told him, hey, read Rats in the Walls. He later came to me, and with some trepidation, he was like, so... really, that's the character you thought I would think was cool, that and the name and everything? And I was like, yeah, wasn't that cool? And he said, well, okay, it's a little odd. A cat named Nigger Man, that you would describe it in those terms. I was like, wait, what? I had screwed up. Brown Jenkin is in Dreams of the Witch House because he's the witch's familiar. Rats in the Walls, this is Lovecraft writing earlier in the 20th century, features a cat who can detect ghosts, and the cat's name is, as I just said, Nigger Man, which is not an appropriate name and is not at all what I was thinking of. So to my horror, I realized my friend read Rats in the Walls and thought that this was the name that I thought was cool. So Brown Jenkin, not in Rats in the Walls, even though he's a rat. You can understand that mistake. So here's the synchronicity with Ballad of Black Tom that Andrew S. mentions. In later publications of Rats in the Walls, instead of the cat being named Nigger Man, they changed the cat's name to Black Tom. There. So Andrew S., you've probably read these, but I recommend both Dreams in the Witch House for creepy little Brown Jenkin and Rats in the Walls, so you can enjoy the fact that I thought Brown Jenkin was in Rats in the Walls, which he's not. Number 8. Oh, Chris H. This is awesome. Chris H. recommended Music. What happened? This is this fella, Scott Miller, who is, a music critic. He writes very articulately about music, about songs. For every year, going back to 60s, I think, maybe a late 50s, he makes a CD mix, not based on the most popular of the year necessarily, not even necessarily his favorite, the most influential. He has various criteria, like he's making a CD-length mix track of songs from that year and then writing about each of those songs and why he includes it. So this is so much fun to look up a year, like I looked up the year I was born. That's not really the way to do it, because you probably weren't listening to a lot of the songs on the year that you were born. They probably not a lot of context for you there. So instead, go to the year you graduated high school and look up what songs Scott Miller decides to put on your mix CD, and read the little snippet of text about each of them. He's got some fascinating commentary and insights on the different music. I love this thing. This is great. Unfortunately, I don't know that I can counter-recommend something that cool. So what I will do is, as someone who is an avid movie watcher, I love reading about movies and talking to movies, a rough counterpart to this, there's a reviewer who's one of my favorites, a reviewer I really like named James Berardinelli. He doesn't do that stupid thing where he just writes the plot of a movie and then has a paragraph describing whether or not he liked it and then gives it a rating. He writes about movies in context, and he is very personal with his reviews. He'll reference other movies. He doesn't, not that I've seen, he'll never really just write a plot review. He has a sense for, don't say too much. So if you go to James Berardinelli's website, realviews.net, real being, of course, R-E-E-L. Oh, we have a cat here. Come here. Oh my gosh, cat. If you go to realviews.net, you can, he's got a database, archives of all of his reviews there. Because unlike my favorite reviewers, Janet Maslin, Pauline Kael, Manolia Dargis, I love her, Manolia Dargis, but she's written for different publications. So if I want to say, look for Manolia Dargis's review of Reservoir Dogs or something older like that, I don't know who she wrote for. You can Google it and find it. But with James Berardinelli, just go to his website, and it's fun reading to just read what he thought of any given movie. Furthermore, in each review, he'll do something similar to what I do on my movie podcast, where we mention an over and an under, a movie we like better, a movie we didn't like as much. He'll list with each review 3 examples of this kind of movie that are better, 3 examples that are not as good. And you can just go down this rabbit hole of Berardinelli's reviews at realviews.net. Number 9, Chris Markinson, and I think based on some things that I talked about, recommends Elektra the Assassin, which is a comic book. All right, cat's leaving. And I've gone ahead and ordered it. I am now a comic book nerd. This was, my brother-in-law many years ago gave me a bunch of comic books for me to read, said you might like these, like Watchmen, there was some Dark Knight stuff in there. This is the only one he gave me that I really liked, that I remembered enjoying. So Chris Markinson is like, go ahead, put that up as my recommendation, as my choice this month. And I've got it, I own it. It's Frank Miller, and so I don't know comic books enough. You have the writer and the drawer, the illustrator, the artist, right. The artist is named Bill Sienkiewicz. Did I get that right? And Chris says that this right here was the Frank Miller and Sienkiewicz at the height of their popularity, which I guess is a good thing. So my counter recommendation, Chris M. One of the reasons that I liked Elektra Assassin, in addition to the really trippy artwork, okay, I'm seeing some trippy stuff. I love the idea of the female heroine being super powerful, and who would normally be the male hero, in this case I think it's a CIA agent, being a complete and utter dupe. I thought that was amusing. I liked that dynamic. So my counter recommendation is something that I'm in the middle of watching. I'm a few episodes into it, 4 or 5. And what I love about it is about a female character who is, she's not a superhero, but kind of like Elektra. She is inscrutable, powerful. She has the upper hand so far in most of the TV series. I imagine it stays that way. And it's an actress I really like named Riley Keough. It's a TV show. It's a series directed by Amy Seimetz and a guy named Kenneth Lodgman, called The Girlfriend Experience. Yes, The Girlfriend Experience. And I love how the main character in this, played by Riley Keough, has the upper hand, and the men in this are complete dupes to her. She has all the power. It is an interesting dynamic. It's beautifully shot. Wonderfully acted. Riley Keough's amazing. So that's my counter recommendation. Oh, good golly, where are we? Number 10, Will G, Secret World Legends. Actually, I was super enthusiastic about Secret World Legends, and then I played it. Secret World Legends has a bit of work to be done. So it's basically Secret World, the MMO by Funcom, adapted to an easier, more accessible, free-to-play action RPG kind of structure. And, oh dear, yeah, I'm not sure it works. So if you're curious about Secret World Legends, I would almost say wait, or just go ahead and play Secret World. It has a very complex, maybe overly complex, finicky character build system that I actually enjoyed as a way to just get in there and tinker with things. Because it's an MMO, right? You're not going to fail. MMOs are about optimizing, not fail states. How quickly do you progress? A lot of RPGs do that. So the content in Secret World is great. The writing, the voice acting, other than the fact that you've got the stupid mute protagonist gimmick, the cinematic stuff is cool. And I think a better way to experience that at this point, rather than the superficial free-to-play gameplay that's currently in Secret World Legends, just play Secret World. Number 11, Alex C. Really? Dark Tower 1, The Gunslingers. Okay. Alex C. heard me disparaging Stephen King as a writer previously, so I think he's punishing me. This is a movie, right, with Idris Elba and Matthew McConaughey. Shouldn't I just see the movie? So that is the recommendation from Alex C. is read The Gunslingers. Isn't it like time travel, like a cowboy travels through time? I don't know much about gunslingers. All right. Not a fan of Stephen King, just period. Whatever. Furthermore, I'm not a fan of his son. And not because he's Stephen King's son. I've given Joe Hill's stuff a try. But I am going to recommend, even if you don't like a writer, writers are uniquely appealing when they are describing something that they uniquely understand. And there's a Joe Hill short story called The Best New Horror. Is that right? It's in his collection, 20th Century Ghosts. Let me get the glare off. And it is the first story in here. Yeah, Best New Horror. And I love Best New Horror. Best New Horror is fantastic because it is written by Joe Hill, by Stephen King's son. So that's my recommendation. And I wanted to point out to you something. So Joe Hill, if you've seen Stephen King, I mean, God bless the guy. He's been through a lot. He's a successful writer. He's offered young writers some great advice in his On Writing book. That's great. He has certainly influenced horror for the better. But he's a big dork, right? We've seen pictures of Stephen King. He's a dork. He's one of us. That's not a criticism. Look at Joe Hill's author picture on 20th Century Ghost. Look at that sort of Ben Affleck-y brooding that he's doing, right? Now, I want to show you, he recently, this is a more recent book. I think this is like 10 years old. This just came out. It's horrible. And look, I read all of this stupid thing. The Fireman is a spontaneous combustion apocalypse book. Yeah, it's dumb. Let me show you his picture in The Fireman. In the book jacket. What happened to the bearded, brooding Ben Affleck-y guy? That definitely looks like Stephen King's son to me. I just thought that was kind of charming. At a certain point, you are so successful that who cares if you're a dork in a fire truck? All right, so there's my counter recommendation. Best New Horror by Joe Hill. Number 12, Clay H. Don't know anything about this, and I specifically didn't want to know anything, except that it is, he won the Nobel Prize for Literature back in the 80s for this. Let me attempt this name. Apologies in advance for butchering it. Naguib Mahfouz? Mahfouz? Yeah. A Nobel Prize winner. He wrote Arabian Nights and Days, which I just went ahead and bought. Shortish novel. That's the request from Clay H. For a counter recommendation, I went ahead and called up a list of the people who've won the Nobel Prize for Literature. Most recently, Bob Dylan. That was weird. And went down the list and was thinking what's something I could counter recommend. and realized I don't know a lot of these people. Non-famous people tend to win that. You don't get Cormac McCarthy or whoever winning those. So one of the names I did recognize is Alice Munro, who won it, I think, a few years ago. And I don't know her from her writing. I think she's a short story writer. But I know her from a movie called Hate Ship, Love Ship, starring Kristen Wiig, which I kind of don't like. And it is from an Alice Munro short story called something like Hate Ship, Love Ship, Friendship, Courtship. It's something like that. It's a series of words. For the movie, they thought, that's too long a title for a movie, we're just going to take the first two words. But what is in Hate Ship, Love Ship that I really like is Kristen Wiig attempting something other than a normal light comedic performance. And she's fascinating when she does that. I'm not sure entirely successful. I'm going to change my you know what I am? I'm going to change my recommendation. I was going to recommend Welcome to Me. But it just occurred to me, she is so good, seriously, she's lighthearted and there's comic moments in it, but she's really good with Bill Hader in a movie called The Skeleton Twins. So that I'm crossing out Welcome to Me, which is actually weirdly glib about a serious issue, which is mental illness. Welcome to Me doesn't. Let's just write in Skeleton Twins. That's my counter recommendation for Clay H. from... No, not even. Skeleton Twins, not written by Nobel Literature Prize winner Alice Munro, but it is a Kristen Wiig movie, and Kristen Wiig was in an adaptation of an Alice Munro short story. Alice Munro won the Nobel Prize, as did Naguib Mahfouz. There you go. That's the kind of rabbit hole you get to come down with me when you have counter recommendations. Number 13, Unlucky 13, Colton W. says, sorry if I'm being boring, but I really want you to watch Look Who's Back, a German comedy about Hitler. Colton W., okay. You've voted for this, I think, twice, maybe 3 times. All right, good. I will go ahead and check that out, definitely. I would have checked it out anyway, but I will move it up to the top of my list. A German comedy about Hitler? Okay. And again, he apologizes for being boring. You're not being boring. Persistence is fine. I don't have a counter recommendation beyond the one that I've recommended, which is Google Martina Hill, find an English subtitled video on YouTube of hers, and enjoy. She's amazing. All right, number 14. She's basically the German Amy Schumer. Is that giving her short shrift? Maybe. Number 14. Hoarder S recommends Shadow Tactics, or he wants me to review Shadow Tactics Blades of the Shogun, which is a real-time, is it real-time or turn-based? I actually don't remember. At any rate, it's a tactical puzzle game in which you play different shoguns in different little environments. I think it's kind of like those Commandos games, right? I honestly, because I've played the first few levels, it's like that thing where you remember a movie, and you can't remember whether it was in color or black and white. Like your memory just goes ahead and remembers it for you independent of those kind of details. Like you see a foreign film. Did you see it dubbed or subtitled? They blend together. So I honestly can't remember, is Shadow Tactics turn-based or real-time? At any rate, I played a little bit of the early bits, and it looked intriguing. So my counter recommendation, Hoarder S, there are a series of turn-based puzzle games that are adapted from the Hitman and Tomb Raider series, called I think they're just called Go! To distinguish them from the ancient game. So Hitman Go. There's a Tomb Raider Go, which is fine, but the Hitman assassination conceit works better with these puzzles. I recommend Hitman Go, which is on the iOS and the PC. Another example of me knowing nothing about this, I didn't look it up. Sam, did I not write Sam's last initial? I think it's S. Sam recommends Last Days, a book by Brian Evanson. I did look this up. It looks like horror. I loved the artwork on the cover and thought, okay, that looks interesting. I'm not going to read anything else. Last Days by Brian Evanson. My counter recommendation, there's a movie called Last Days. Has nothing to do with whatever this horror book is. It is instead about the last days of Kurt Cobain. And it's a Gus Van Sant movie. It is very Gus Van Sant-y, but I love it. If you ever or Into Nirvana, if you went through that phase of the 90s. It is an intriguing interpretation of what Kurt Cobain's life must have been like. So Last Days, the Gus Van Sant movie. Not related to the horror book, I presume. Number 16, Ronnie A. This looks hilarious. This looks great. The Cartoon History of the Universe, which sure enough is a comic book opening with the Big Bang. Okay, Ronnie A. My counter recommendation. Randall Munroe does the webcomic XCDK. What is it? XKCD. So those 4 letters, the order probably doesn't matter. If you Google it, you can find Randall Munroe's comics. He has a great book called The Thing Explainer, which is what it sounds like. He explains the dynamics of things you might not understand, like television and rockets and quantum theory, whatever, using the same kind of drawings and charm that are in XCKD. Did I get it right that time? XKCD. What does that even stand for? I bet if I were to look that up, I would remember the letters in the proper order. So Thing Explainer is my counter recommendation. Jarmo P. Sauna, really? So Jarmo P. wants me to review a movie called Sauna. Sauna is a Finnish, it's a horror movie. I love Sauna. Now the Swedes, the Danes, we know a lot of their movies. There are a lot of prominent, especially the Danes, a lot of prominent filmmakers from those Scandinavian countries. For whatever reason, even Norway, the Troll Hunter guy, there aren't a lot of Finnish filmmakers that we know of. Aki Kaurismäki, that's pretty much it, that one guy. However, Sauna is a Finnish horror movie that is uniquely Finnish. It's weirdly historical, and it makes me think that I wish more Finns would make movies. So Sauna is amazing, Jarmo P. He says, however, and I find this interesting, that he doesn't like horror. So for a counter recommendation, he wants something that's not horror. Okay. By the way, the actor in Sauna, his name is Vil Virtanen. He looks like a young Max von Sydow. I love that guy. He's amazing. I want to watch other things he's in. He's in a TV series, I think it's Swedish, called George Scott, which unfortunately I was waved off of and told that it's awful. Here's my counter recommendation, Jarmo P. And this isn't really horror. It's not horror. It's not horror. It is a historical thrillery kind of thing, much like Sauna is about a Finnish-Russian expedition to map a border. There's a movie called Black Death, which is about a monk and a crusader, and they're going to investigate a village. It's like a historical mystery. And it's kind of not horror, but that's what I recommend. It even has in it a young lady named Carice Van Houten, who you will recognize as Melisandre from Game of Thrones. Sean Bean is the lead in Black Death. Eddie Redmayne is in it. We, of course, know him as the villain in Jupiter Ascending. I didn't see it. I forget what it's called. Black Death is my counter recommendation. All right. I think it's an English director, too, named Christopher Smith, who I also recommend his stuff. He's got a horror movie called Severance. Is that Christopher Smith? Andrew S., another one. I think there's 3 of them. What's your favorite restaurant in LA? Review that, he says. Intriguing. And I was thinking, what is my favorite restaurant in LA? But then it occurred to me, here's my counter recommendation, because it's not specific to a restaurant. Have you ever had Ethiopian food? I hadn't until a few years ago when my sister, who lives in Calgary, and there are apparently some really good Ethiopian restaurants there, introduced me to it. I'd heard of Ethiopian food. I think I just assumed it was like Indian food for some reason. Ethiopian food, what's unique about it is there's a flat, spongy bread, and the food is served on top of it, and you use it to eat the food with your hands. You don't use utensils. I guess you could if you wanted to, but that's kind of part of the charm. So this flat, spongy injera bread, which is really weird. It's very disconcerting at first. You might think, ew, that just looks like soggy pita. It's not. Go with it. Trust me. It's good stuff, Ethiopian food. So there's my counter recommendation, which makes me think I should look for an Ethiopian food restaurant in LA. Surely there is one. Matthew C., Seven Kingdoms 2, the RTS by Trevor Chan. Trevor Chan did a game called Capitalism, and I have been playing recently something that reminds me of capitalism. There is a game called A-Train Classic, which was on the Nintendo DS and was adapted to the PC, but only in Japanese, and has recently, that PC version, been translated into English. So I think it's on Steam as A-Train Classic English. Something like that. Don't get the Japanese version unless you speak Japanese. I love that thing. It's super intricate, super detailed. It's less about specific kinds of goods, although that is in there, than managing the ins and outs of routing and scheduling for trains. And you don't directly grow industry. It grows organically on the map based on how you move goods around. A-Train is great. So it reminds me a lot of what I enjoyed about the Trevor Chan Capitalism game. That's my counter recommendation, Matthew C., Seven Kingdoms 2. I wonder how those hold up. We might find out if I roll a 19. Number 20. Gene V. Now, I'm a little confused. Okay, I think the actual recommendation is not for Life is Strange. Gene V brings up Life is Strange. It's been recommended previously by a couple of people, including Gene V, I believe. And he says there are 2 sequels coming out for it. I know one of them's a prequel. I didn't know there were 2. And he said, shouldn't you get around to playing Life is Strange? But he says that's not his recommendation. His actual recommendation, and he relates it to Life is Strange, which is the single most attention-getting thing I have heard about Life is Strange to make me want to play it. It makes me want to play Life is Strange more than anything else I've heard. He relates it to a movie called Kumiko the Treasure Hunter. And then that is his pick for a review request. Oh, Gene V. Kumiko the Treasure Hunter is heart-wrenching. I love that movie. Ringo Kikuchi? I should have looked up how to say her name. I didn't write it. The actress in that is so good. The bits with the rabbit just slay me. And it's a movie about about reconciling fantasy and reality. You can apply it to things as wide-ranging as religion or as mundane as video games. Kumiko the Treasure Hunter, and it's a weird tone. It's not a comedy, it's funny. The guys who made it, they're a couple of brothers from Texas. I should say they're from Austin. It's a different thing. Because when you talk about Texas filmmakers, invariably, like Richard Linklater, they're from Austin, they're not from Texas. The Zellner brothers, Nathan and, Greg, Tom, I don't think David, I didn't write it. I think it's David and Nathan Zellner. They have done, so Kumiko the Treasure Hunter is their movie. It's about a young woman. I don't want to tell you, although you probably have heard. It's the young woman who sees in Japan, she thinks Fargo is real, and she goes hunting for the money that is buried in the movie Fargo. Enough said. So the Zellner brothers had previously done a movie called Goliath. Before that, Goliath was their first movie. After that, they did a movie called Kid Thing, both of which are a little rough but fascinating. I would recommend, both of them, but I think I'd go with Goliath, just to kind of see, in contrast to Kumiko the Treasure Hunter, how far they've come. As far as style, tone, mood, budget. And I think one of them is the lead in Goliath. I think that's David Zellner, if I'm not mistaken. And Goliath is, Goliath is about a guy whose cat goes missing. And there. So that's my counter recommendation. Number 21, Johan O recommends a China Miéville book called The City and the City. It's The City, ampersand, the City. And he says the less you know, the better. And then he started to write a little bit. And I did that thing where I just scanned for words. I didn't want to read everything he wrote because the moment you say the less you know, the better, I want you to stop talking. So I scanned a little bit. Couldn't really cull from that anything meaningful for a counter recommendation. But what I'm going to do, I would say, as far as titles, The City and the City, what is a redundant title I can counter recommend? Here's all I could come up with. I'm sure there are better examples. There we go. And I don't actually really recommend, I mean, Absalom is amazing. It is very challenging. If you want to start with William Faulkner, Light in August, probably, As I Lay Dying, maybe. Don't start with this one. This one, get used to them. Dip your toe in first, and then later, when you're ready to jump into the deep end, try Absalom. That's 21. 22. Rich VR is picking these weird old movies. The Loved One. He says, it stars Robert Morse as a British poet. I don't even know who Robert Morse is. Rod Steiger, I think I know who that is. Is that the guy with Sidney Poitier in that They Call Me Mr. Tibbs movie? I don't know. Rod Steiger is an embalmer. Jonathan Winters as a funeral home manager and his twin brother. Liberace as a coffin salesman. Yikes. All right, Rich VR. Now, when I looked this up, I saw that it is based on an Evelyn Waugh book. Interesting. Here's a tip for you. Evelyn Waugh, not a chick, a dude. George Sand, not a dude, a chick. True. So this is way out of my wheelhouse on every front. I wouldn't know what to counter-recommend. So I'm going to counter-recommend, instead of The Loved One, The Loved Ones, plural, which is a weird Australian horror movie, which actually I don't like that much. But it's kind of Misery meets Sweet 16, the John Hughes movie. And the actor who gets tormented, I just find hugely annoying, so I think it's funny that he gets kidnapped and tormented in The Loved Ones. All right, here we go, 23. Double Indemnity. Soren H. requests that. It's an old grandpa movie. He even lists the year. I think he lists the year. 1944. Oh, I can't believe they were making movies back then. Well, they were. They just didn't really know how to do it. Every now and then they'd make something great like Casablanca or Sunset Boulevard. So Soren H. actually says, since I recently went on enthusiastically about how great Sunset Boulevard is, that maybe I should see Double Indemnity. And I think he implies that Double Indemnity is also directed by Billy Wilder, the guy who did Sunset Boulevard. I don't know. But he also mentions it in the context of a discussion we had on the movie podcast about scenes involving stairs. And I think I've seen Double Indemnity. I promise I didn't look this up, but isn't it with Fred McMurray? And isn't there some scene where a woman comes walking downstairs and there's an ankle bracelet involved? And it was super risque for 1944 or whenever? So that's what I vaguely know about Double Indemnity, and I could be wrong about all of that. So just to hedge my bet, because I'm not sure if what I think I know is correct, I'm instead going to recommend another movie about insurance. In a movie called The Incredibles, Craig T. Nelson's character, Mr. Incredible, works in an insurance company. There's my counter recommendation. His boss is Wally Shawn from Uncle Vanya on 42nd Street. Number 24, Seven Wonders Duels. Eric G. says this was on his wedding registry. I don't know if he's getting married or if this is previously he got married and nobody was kind enough to get him this. He wants to know if that's a good two-player game, because he's looking for two-player games to enjoy with his wife or wife-to-be. Don't know where he falls on the wedding timeline. So Eric G. has mentioned this before. We've talked about two-player board games. Last month we've already gone over Santorini. I've already counter-recommended a game called Cold War as great short two-player games. Cold War, I think, would be my favorite. But Eric G. said, unfortunately, it seems to be out of stock. He can't find it. So, Eric G., I was recently given this copy of the original, which has oversized cards and these poker chips in it. The gameplay is no different in this. It just has different pieces, and plus it's the first run, so it's better, component-wise. That has therefore rendered superfluous this copy of Cold War, the reprint. So Eric G., send me your address. Rather than counter-recommending something, I'm just going to send you this, all right? Send me your address. This is yours. Number 25, John B. So John B. is one of maybe 10, probably fewer people, that if he were to recommend something, all he has to do is say, Tom, check this out, and I would. I know enough about John B. to know how much our tastes coincide. He says a book called The House on the Borderlands by William Hope Hodgson. It's way too many names. He describes it as 1 part Amnesia, the Dark Descent, 1 part I Am Legend, 1 part 2001 Space Odyssey. All right. And he also says it's probably, quote, the weirdest novel I have ever read, end quote. Whoa. John B., I don't know that I have much to counter-recommend, and I can't imagine you don't know about this. I don't really like it, but it's weird, and I like where it goes, and I like how it gets weird. And it's a book called House of Leaves. And, you know, one of the reasons I think you've read it is we might have even talked about it. House of Leaves is challenging. Now you might look, oh God, look how long that is. But he does some weird things with topography and page layout. Well, suffice to say, this is really weird. It is meta weird. It's memorable, I'll tell you that much. Oh, good Lord, the remastered full color edition. I didn't realize I had a special copy of that. So John B., there's my counter recommendation, House on the Borderlands, which, by the way, that is coming in another Amazon.com order. A lot of these things that you guys recommend, I just get anyway, as you can see from some of these other things I've showed you. All right, here we go. In the home stretch, NB, and that's how he's listed on Patreon, NB, November Bravo, or Nota Bene. Don't know what it is, don't know if that's his initials, we'll just call him November Bravo. November B, don't want to out anyone with their last name. Says, I know, Shadowcat, I don't know what to tell him. Come here. Oh my gosh. NB says Solium Infernum. He would like a review of that. And he more specifically said he would like to have that Tom-splained. And that's what happens when I try to do videos, is I end up just explaining super obvious stuff. And depending on whether it's annoying, Tom-splaining might be a denigrating term or not. I'm not sure. But it is a fact. It happens on a lot of my videos. So he said he could use some Tom-splaining about Solium Inferno because he can't quite wrap his head around it. And he also preempts as counter-recommendations. I don't know how I feel about this. I guess it's legal. He preempts Armageddon Empires and Occult Chronicles, which are a couple of other games by Vic Davis, because he says he's already played them. And he counts them among his, quote, guilty pleasures. To which I say, November Bravo, there should be nothing guilty about taking pleasure in Armageddon Empires and Occult Chronicles. Although I noticed you didn't mention his Western game, the name of which I can't recall. I keep forgetting. 5-hand poker, 5-hand shootout, 6-gun poker, something like that. It's a Western game where you use a poker hand to resolve encounters, I think. At any rate, I could I could sort of work my way around the letter of the law and counter-recommend that game, if I could remember the name of it. But going by the spirit of what you have done, preempting Armageddon Empires and Occult Chronicles as counter-recommendations, I'm going to try to instead recommend something non-Vic Davis. And this was difficult. Solium Infernum is a pretty unique beast, speaking of which. Solium Infernum, it's this board game-like mix of politics and war and diplomacy and exploration and economics and all of this stuff, territory control. It's quite the stew, and it's set in hell. Basically, you're a demon trying to take control of hell. So I was thinking, what is an interesting setting where you navigate all these different gameplay systems? That's a computer game. That's not a board game. And I had a hard time coming up with something. The closest I could come up with, I actually don't really enjoy, not because of anything about the design, but because of the presentation. There's a video game called Armello, which does kind of that. Armello is way more streamlined and focused, but it's a video game board game where animals, they're cute little fluffy animals. Well, it's like a fox and a bear and a rabbit, and each species is a faction, and you choose a hero. The animals are dealing with the fact that the king is going insane. What do we do in this power vacuum? And it's this cool board game about territory control and exploration and rolling dice and combat and card play. Unfortunately, the presentation as a video game is really, really screwy. The developers focused more on showing off production values than making the game manageable, and I find that hugely aggravating. But as a game design, it's great. Armello is. So, however, that said, I didn't want to recommend Armello because I have such a hard time dealing with the way it's laid out. So instead, I'm going to counter-recommend a game called Gremlins, Inc., which on the face of it is just a roll and move board game. But it's got a cool steampunk setting with little mischievous gremlins, and there are different abilities, and one of the add-ons they recently added to it gives the different players asymmetrical abilities, which is cool. There are different systems for wealth and law, and there's a jail you go to. There's an astral plane that's difficult to get to. But I really like Gremlins, Inc. There's a voting system. So that would be my counter recommendation for Solium Infernum. I'm not real comfortable with that because, again, Solium Infernum is just a unique beast. All right, and then finally, number 27, John R. He says, I think it's weird that this movie exists. Free Money. Didn't know what that was. I looked it up. It's an old movie. Not old like Double Indemnity old, but I think like 70s. Didn't write the year. Old enough that Marlon Brando is the main credited actor. So, okay, John R. Free Money. I am not a fan of Marlon Brando. I'm sure he's a genius, but, and I haven't seen that On the Waterfront movie, but I've seen Godfather, and I've seen Apocalypse Now and Last Tango in Paris. Brando just strikes me as a crazy guy who could rein it in enough to present it for cameras, and I don't want to trash Marlon Brando, because what he does he's great at, but I was never a Marlon Brando fan is what I was getting at. With one exception, I recall seeing a movie called Missouri Breaks with him and Jack Nicholson way back when. And the craziness of Marlon Brando, I think, is uniquely suited to that movie in a way where it kind of takes me out of Apocalypse Now and The Godfather. Yeah, so Missouri Breaks, that's my counter recommendation to whatever Free Money is, John R. All right, so we have 27 choices, votes. All right, let's see if I can get randomresult.com to work on the iPad correctly. Here we go. Cat, here, let's go ahead and put the cat up here. Oh, good Lord. All right, here we go. Distinct numbers between 1 and 27, and the winner is, oh, did it take? No, shoot, a monkey. Oh, it did take 26. Oh, good Lord, what is that? Oh, Solium Infernum. All right, I'll take it. Congratulations to Nota Bene or November Bravo or NB. Solium Infernum is the winner of this month's review request. So thank you guys so much. Let's do this again in a month. You'll be getting a message from me. More importantly, thank you so much for the support on Patreon. As I've said before, and as I deeply, deeply mean, I could not do this without you guys. So I deeply appreciate this. Hope you're having a great summer, and we'll see you guys in a month. All right, cheers. Where'd the cat go?